All right, so welcome everyone holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. Again, I want to welcome everyone holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. We are at the end of the chapter. Hopefully, we're going to finish it today. We are in verse 32. We spoke week about number of things. One, about basically what's the idea of making a sin offering. Going out to make a sin offering and a burnt offering, right? For a woman who's going to go to the mikvah on the 8th day, etc. So we spoke quite a bit about that. So again, we are in chapter 15, Book of Leviticus, verse 32. So the Torah tells me, Zois Torah Tazav, Vasher Teitze Mimenu, Shichvas Zera Letamavo. So Torah here says that this is the law. Normally, when the Torah says Zois Torahs, right? Torahs means Torah, right? This law, right? This law, or this is the law concerning the Zav, and from whom there is an emission of semen through which it becomes impure. Right? So again, we've been speaking for quite a while, about all this difference between woman when she gets a period and during, between periods, if, she sees blood or whatever. So there have been a lot of things, she sits on things, becomes impure. Someone's with her, touches her, becomes impure, whatever, all kinds of different things. It comes to the end of the chapter and says, again, chapter 15, verse 32, this is the law concerning the Zav. I have to see what that means. And from whom somebody has an emission of semen, guy has an emission of semen, through which it becomes impure. So comes along Rashi. Rashi over here says, what does it mean? What does it mean over here? This is the law concerning the Zav, meaning one who had the perception of a discharge. Right? And what is the law? Right? That's the question. What is the law over here? Now, interesting enough, Rashi here says, right, we're going to have to sort of dissect it here. Right? Rashi says, one who had the perception. Right? He saw a discharge. Seemingly that's what it means. Right? Hard to go by the English over here. But it means he saw, right? Seemingly saw a discharge. Now, what's the problem? What's the problem with saying this? Because we're going to see in the next verse. Because it says, and concerning a woman who suffers through her separation, i.e., she got a period, and a person who has discharge. So very good. So what's going on? Why is it repeated? I don't need to say it over here, or I don't need to see in the next verse. Right? There's a superfluous statement over here. It says, Zois Torah Hazav. This is the law concerning the Zav. Right? The man who's impure due to his discharge. Though, why do I mention it? If it's already going to be mentioned again, I don't need to mention it here. Right? So it's here to teach us that a person who has a discharge on one day, which is not be given by scripture. Torah hasn't told me yet, right, what the law of such a person. Right? We know if they have 3 consecutive days, we saw it, right, etc. We mentioned that before. Mentioned, what happens. She has a flow beyond the separation, whatever, different things that we mentioned. The problem over here is, I don't need to say this. I don't need to now say, what's the law? What do you mean, what's the law? What's it talking about? It's talking about having a discharge. I already know. It's already going to be mentioned. If it's already going to be mentioned, I don't need to mention it again. Right? And the problem is, as we always say, if something is mentioned more than once, even though it seems superfluous and I don't need it. Question's going to be, so why is it mentioned? Right? And Karaites going to have, they're going to make up their own Torah. Right? They're going to have to come up with an explanation also, just like the Torah will tell me, you're not allowed to cook a calf in its mother's milk. How many times does the Torah tell me that? 3. Now, if it tells me that 3 times, there has to be a purpose each time. You can't just say, well, it's there for emphasis. What do you mean? The Torah never repeats anything for no reason. So if the Torah never repeats anything for no reason, we have to come up with some sort of explanation. Now, the Karaites themselves obviously don't believe in oral law. So they're going to have their own interpretation. Right? They're going to have, they're going to have, quote unquote, their own oral law, so to speak. But they're going to have to come up with an explanation. They're going to have to come up with some sort of explanation why this was repeated, why it says it over here, why it mentions in the next verse as well. So one of the commentaries says here, right, seemingly this word hazav, right, the one that has this omission, this discharge, superfluous. So why is it here? So why is it mentioned here? Only to teach us the law of a person who has discharge only on one day. Because if I know 3 consecutive days, that's one thing. But how do I know if they're impure on one day? Right? Maybe it's not pure for one day, whatever the case is. Right? But Torah hasn't told me. Torah has not made clear. It's not said anything about this. Right? So Rashi here means it's talking about someone who had this discharge. Very good. So I mention it. It's already going to be mentioned again. It's already going to be mentioned again. I have to come up with another reason why it's here. Right? So one of the commentaries there points out it's mentioned again because this case hasn't been mentioned. It's not the same case. Talking about someone's already discharge on one day. Right? We've seen other cases before. Starting on 2 days, 3 days, whatever the case is, but we've never seen such a case. So that's the novelty. That's the novelty over here, as one of the commentaries. As one of the commentaries tells us. Yeah, let's go a little bit further. We'll finish the chapter up. Verse 33. Now the Torah says, last verse in chapter 15, concerning a woman who suffers through a separation, she got a period, and a male who has a discharge. Right? So they're both impure. Right? Torah tells me clear, they're both impure, whether male or female. And we're also talking about concerning a man who lies with an impure woman. Right? And that we saw before. But actually, before I get there, I forgot to go through one other Rashi here. That the Torah told me before that if a guy has a emission of semen, right? So Rashi says he only had a perception of a discharge. Is one who's impure due to an emission of semen. He's impure, and he's impure that night. Right? He has to immerse himself in the mikvah, same day as the discharge. Right? But he becomes pure, afterwards. Right? So again, what do we see? We see that person had a discharge, right? A man had a discharge over here. So therefore, he's impure. Right? He's impure, and he's going to be impure till that evening. Right? So the Torah makes clear again that that's going to be the case. That's going to be the case with that. He has to go to the mikvah. And then after that, he's pure. Now comes verse 33. And verse 33 tells me, concerning a woman, again, suffers through a period. Person who has a discharge, that's what we've been speaking about pretty much for most of the chapter. Whether male or female, in parentheses, what does that mean? Going to be impure. Right? You have to go through a status of purity. Right? You're going to have to become pure in a certain way. What makes, what is the status of impurity? What does that mean? If they touch something, they lie on something, they sit on something, right, etc. We've spoken about. So whether it's going to be a male or a female over here, and the same thing with a man who lies with an impure woman. Right? Meaning, simple explanation is that a male who has relations with a woman before she went to the mikvah, right? Before she had discharge, obviously, of blood, so they have to be separate. But if he has, let's say she stopped seeing blood, he's intimate with her, it's Torah prohibition, pretty severe Torah prohibition. Now, a person may say, which we mentioned before, well, a person may say, purity, impurity, like this is a natural thing, right? 100% a natural thing. Now, people would say, okay, once she stopped bleeding, everything's good. Why can't they be together? You know why? Because the Torah tells me. It's a Torah prohibition. Right? So the Torah says that we mentioned before, right? Talking about a case where a man lies with an impure woman. And again, it's going to be a severe prohibition. Says Rashi over here, person who has a discharge, one who had 2 perceptions, right? They had 2 discharges over here. But one who had 3, let's say he had 3 discharges over here. And that we already spoke about, right? That we spoke about verses 2 and 3. And mentions here, see Rashi over there in verse 3. So just take a look at that quickly. Chapter 15, verse 3, what did the Torah tell me? Torah tells me, wrong chapter. Torah tells me, chapter 15, verse 3, thus shall be his impurity through his discharge, whether flesh runs with his discharge, whether flesh is stopped up, he's impure. This is the status of impurity here. Right? Talking about a guy over here, guy who has a discharge. Right? So what does Rashi say? Rashi says discharge comes out of his body, right? Comes out of interesting, where you might think it comes out of his nose, comes out of his ear. Obviously, it comes from that part of the body, whereas it's discharge. And what Rashi says, he has 2 perceptions of discharge, sees twice, and that the Torah says is impure. Right now, what if he had 3? Also impure. Right, so Rashi over here says in chapter 15, verse 3, yes, through discharge is necessary for impurity. Third one, what is the obligation? Third one, he has to bring a sacrifice. Okay? So he's got to bring a sacrifice. Now, what do we say before? Now we have to go back. Right? What do we say before? We said before in the previous verse. What is the law? Why does it say Zav over here? Why does it say the status of a Zav, the law concerning a Zav? What's the law? Because we only had 1 discharge. Oh, but we saw from the beginning of the chapter, in order to be impure, you have to have 2. Right? In order to bring a sacrifice, you have to have 3. So what's the novelty over here? The novelty is we have a law has been mentioned. And that's why it's mentioned over here. Because otherwise I wouldn't have known. Right? A person may have deduced. Maybe you tell me, well, if I know from verse 3, chapter 15, verse 3, Book of Leviticus, you can tell me if he has 2 discharges, then, he's impure. If he has 3, he's going to have to bring a sacrifice. Okay, very good. So if I know he's impure at 2, wouldn't I think he's impure at 1? I mean, that I would think would be proper logic, right? Simple logic over here, right? But what did Rashi say, right? Or what does the commentary in Rashi here say, right? Over here, I need this verse to teach me the law of a person who has a discharge only in 1 day. That prohibition has not been given. Why don't you tell me if it's given on 1 day? If I already know 2 days he's impure, maybe I'd say on 1 day. Maybe I can make an inference and say 1 day. Because if I know on 2 days he's impure, 3 days for sure he's impure, and he has to bring a sacrifice to boot. So I'll say 1 day also. Who says? Who says I can make such an inference? As this commentary points out, that's why I have the verse. That's exactly why I have this verse here. Because it's coming to tell me something didn't tell me before. Right? And again, Karaite's going to have to come up with some sort of explanation of why that is. Because the Torah never mentions anything, as we've seen. We mentioned it many times. Torah never mentions anything more than once for no reason. For no reason, not going to do it. It has to be there has to be something else going on. It's a separate case. It's a different thing. Whatever the explanation is, things are not repeated for no reason. Right? So explains Rashi over here. Yeah, 1 second. One thing comes on the Sforno. The Sforno over here says that it mentions in this verse, it mentions a woman got a period, mentions a zav, someone who has a seminal emission, right? It mentions masculine and feminine, right? Sorry, male and female. Why does it mention male and female? Right? Why specifically that language? It comes along the Sforno and he says you have to know the difference. You have to know the difference between a guy who has a discharge from a woman, because the laws are not the same, right? We don't equate the laws. They're different laws, right? Different laws over here, right? Because by a woman if she has a discharge, by a woman if she has a discharge, when is she going to be forbidden to her husband, and when does she become impure? When that discharge is red. Now we would say today anything similar to red, right? Red, pink, let's say black, right? Black, would render a woman impure. She wouldn't be allowed to be with her husband. There is a question about the status of, or make it easier before I get to that. If a woman, let's say, saw a discharge of yellow is pure. That's not an issue, right? That's not an issue. The rabbis tell us. Brown, somewhere in the middle. It's not exactly red, right? But it's not exactly, yellow either. So that's, that if you're not sure, then you go to a Rav, show him show it to him, see, right? There are people certainly experts in these, in these things to know, if it's really blood or it's not or whatever. But the point over here is, says it's for when's the woman going to become impure? When she sees red, right? And that's blood, right? Whether it's, it's dark, it's pink, whatever, that's going to render her impure. And what about discharge for a guy? He's not going to see red, obviously. So whatever the discharge is, he should be impure. Right? 100% he should be impure. Not going to depend on the color over here. Right? Unless it's something where, it went to the bathroom or something like that. That's what it is. But, in general, that's probably not the case. Right? In this case, probably not the case. So therefore, by him, whatever comes out will become impure. By a woman, no. It has to be a specific color. Right? It's not a specific color. Right? If it's a permissible color, not a problem. Right? It's really not an issue. Right? If it's not an issue, fine. If it's red or something similar, okay, that'll be forbidden. Now, someone could ask the question, what's going on over here? What's the difference? What's the difference? Colors or whatever. So for a guy, there's no issue. There's absolutely no issue. It's only an issue by a woman. Question is, whatever comes out, color is pretty significant, right? It's either going to make her permissible or make her forbidden, right? And if she's forbidden, and she's intimate with her husband, so it's a big problem. If she doesn't go to the mikveh, right? If she doesn't go to the mikveh, let's say, she stopped bleeding, everything's good, still forbidden. But the point over here is that there are questionable colors, right? There are colors that are obvious, right? Anything similar to red or pink is going to render her impure, right? Unless it's proven it came from a wound, right? Let's say there was a wound or whatever, and you can then if you could prove it's from that, then that might make it permissible, right? But if again, it's a straight color here, then it depends on the color. If it's anything similar to red, right, then it's going to be forbidden. So says the Sforno over here. Now it's interesting. He also says, what else do we have to look into over here? The end of the verse, it says a man, is intimate with his wife, also becomes impure, right? But it's tremendous prohibition, right? Tremendous prohibition if he's with his wife when he's not allowed to be. So he says you have to think over here. A man is with a woman when she's impure. What does it say? It says that he has the status. It says it's forbidden. Why? Because she has a certain status. she's forbidden to be with him. Right? Now, again, people are going to say, what's the big deal? Right? This is a natural occurrence. If it's a natural occurrence, if it's nature's biology, biology 101, 101A, oh, what's the big deal? Right? It's a natural thing. Right? The problem is she has that status. Right? We saw before. She can blame it on Eve. Right? If she wouldn't have eaten from the tree, none of this would have happened. First of all, there wouldn't be death to the world, but she wouldn't have difficulty in childbirth. She wouldn't have difficulty with her period. She wouldn't have difficulty raising children. Right? All these three things, right? We've seen before. Now, so what does it say over here? So it says someone who's with someone who's impure. Right? He's got the status of impurity now because he was with her. But what about somebody? He says, but it's not the same thing as someone who's pure. Right? Someone who's pure who was with with the Zav. Why? Right? Someone who's pure, if they're both have a status of impurity, so maybe I'd say not so bad. They're both impure anyway. What's the difference? Right? So she got a period. He had a seminal emission. They're both impure. Okay, not the end of the world. Right? But even if he's impure, doesn't matter. He now gets that status of impurity from her. Right? How do you add on to impurity? It's an interesting question. Right? But different levels. There are different levels of impurity here without getting into all that. But here it's talking about someone who slept with someone who's impure. Right now, it doesn't say that person himself was pure. Right? It just says the status of somebody who's with somebody like this. Right? But it doesn't say, so it comes on this footnote, says, but it's not talking about someone who's pure, who's with the Zav, someone who had an emission. Not talking about that, because that's worse. That seemingly is worse in different ways. Why? Because here, she's got a status of impurity. But it's not just she has a status of impurity. Right? Not just a status of impurity. There's a certain level, he uses the language over here, a level of sickness. A certain level of sickness over here. So what do you mean? Why did you tell me a certain level of sickness? All doctors, science, are going to jump up and down and yell and scream and say, what's the big deal? This is biology 101. Biology 101. Right? This is something that's common. Right? Something that's common. So if it's something that's common, so, what do you tell me over here? So I would say, in my language, right? In my language, I would say that even though you're going to tell me this is a natural thing, right? It's a natural thing. Nonetheless, it's called a sickness. It's called a sickness. It's called, in my language, I call it spiritual cooties, right? For lack of a better term. She becomes impure. You know why? Because the Torah tells me. The Torah tells me she has a certain status. In a certain status, she sits on anything. If the temple exists in Jerusalem, that becomes impure. Touches her husband, he becomes impure. Right? A lot of things going on over here. But you'll say it's natural. So you say fine. So but if she doesn't go to the mikveh, she still has a status of impurity. The impurity doesn't go away. Now the mikveh will help to take down that status of impurity, even though we don't have a temple today and everyone is in a ritual state of impurity, right? So therefore, that's why it's forbidden for a Jew to go on the Temple Mount, right? Without getting into all that, because we're in a state of impurity. Not to mention the fact that, we don't exactly know where to step up there, even though some people may claim they do know, but you get spiritually cut off if you do, which would be a major tragedy. So therefore, since we're in a state of impurity anyway, not knowing where to step is another issue, right? But that state of impurity stays. No matter what we do, that state of impurity is there. It just so happens for a woman and for some other things, going to the mikveh is going to help, right? But the state of impurity when it comes to the temple, that nothing can help. That nothing can help till the Messiah comes, right? Until the temple is built, right? Nonetheless, over here, going to be forbidden, right? As the Torah tells me. Now, comes along the Rebbeinu B'chai. Now the Rabbeinu Bachai over here has got a major question. It's questions like this. It says the Rabbeinu Bachai, it says a woman time of separation. So he says, okay, we've just gone through this whole chapter, right? We spent weeks, months going through this whole chapter. Now, going through the chapter, would I say, again, it doesn't really matter what I say, but would we say in general that the chapter goes in order of all the cases, right? The status, of a woman getting a period, the status of a zav, right? Status of a guy that has a discharge, and all that. Are the verses 100% in order the way they should be? Comes along the Rabbeinu Bachai, and he says, first of all, what do we talk about first? First, we talked about the parsha of Zav, right? A male that has a discharge, right? That is, if you take a look at chapter 15, verse 2, right? What does verse 2 talk about? A Zav, right? A guy who's has an emission from his body, right? Literally from his flesh, right? When we said from his flesh, way back when, we said which part of his flesh. Person might thought maybe comes out from his eye, from his nose, from his ear, right? But obviously flesh meant a specific place. Fine, started off with that. Started off with the zav. Very good. And then afterwards it says, a woman that a man sleeps with, etc. Verse 18. Right? What verse is that? Is that talking about? So over there, what does it say? Verse 18, it says, a woman with a man who have carnal relations. Right? They shall immerse in the water, remain impure until evening. Right? They had relations. It's not because of the impurity one comes in contact with semen over here, but contact with semen comes through intercourse. Right? Contact other, unseen parts of organs. That's what Rashi here says. Right? Because semen itself doesn't necessarily cause impurity. Right? Okay. So now, what do I have? So now I have that verse. Talks about a woman, who's intimate with a guy. Because that's what we said above. In verse 16. That if a man, has a seminal emission, right? If he has the seminal emission, what's he called? He's called a Balkari, right? A Balkari means someone who had a seminal emission. That's the language of the Gemara uses. Therefore, what does the Torah warn me here? What does the Torah warn me? The Torah here says, this is the law of the Zav. Someone who has a seminal emission that comes out of him, right? As it says in verse 32, right? Remember, Rabbeinu Bachai here says, where did it start from? It started from chapter 15, verse 2. Then we get to chapter 15, verse 16. Then we get to chapter 15, verse 32. And then we get to our verse over here, right? The verse before. Because then we have a warning that the person has seminal emission becomes impure. And then it says, okay, you go back to verse 19. It says if a woman is a ziva, right? What's a ziva? Remember, she got a period, and then she's counting however many clean days, and then she sees blood again, right? She sees blood between 11 days between both periods, so she has a status of what we call a ziva, right? So there it mentions that she had this flow, she becomes a nida, right? She has this separation. And then at the end of the parsha, it says that if a guy sleeps with her, if he's with her and she's impure, right? She got that status of impurity, which is in verse 9, right? We go back in verse 9. One second. Sorry, verse 24, right? In verse 24, it says, again, chapter 15, verse 24, says if he's with her when he's not allowed to be, so he becomes impure over here. He's with someone who's impure. And then it mentions in verse 25, right? It mentions that someone who has a discharge, right, and they have blood for many days. On that it says, right, upon that it says that a zav who has a seminal emission, whether it's for a male, whether it's for a female, and then it says if he's with her, he becomes impure, right? He is with somebody, right, who's impure. So it seems a little bit out of order, right? You start with chapter 2, talks about the zav, with verse 2, right? Then you go into verse 16, then you go into verse 19, then you go to the end, right? It seems maybe a little bit out of order over here. So comes along the Rabbeinu Bachai and he says, it would have been fitting to do it like this, right? This is what the Rabbeinu Bachai says, right? Why did you do it that way? Why is it set up that way? It should have been set up differently. What should the Torah have said first? The Torah should have told me a man who's with a woman when she's impure, and then tell me the end, right? The end over here, right? That it says that a woman, her separation and all that, male and female, right? Whether it's a male or a female, right? If you tell me he's with her when she got a period, right? So it's forbidden to be with her, right? She has status of impurity. So then tell me in the end, okay, this is the status of a male that had to discharge in a woman, right? Then you'll tell me, okay, that a woman who got a period and a person who's with her while she's impure, and then tell me the status of a zav and a ziva, whether it's for a male, whether it's for a female. That would make more sense. That would make more sense. In other words, you tell me verse 19, right? That 7 days she's gonna have the status of being a nida. He's not allowed to be with her, she's impure. And then tell me verse 24, right? If he's with her and he has seminal emission and all that. And then you tell me verse 25, right? In other words, seemingly there's a problem. There's a problem with the order, right? That's basically what he's saying over here. There's a problem. So he says, really, the way he mentioned it before, really should be the right order. Right? It should really be the right order. Now, Rashi many times in the Torah, we'll mention it's not really what we're speaking about here, but I'll mention anyway. And that is, Rashi a number of times will say, Ein muktam u'muchar b'Torah. What does that mean? It means that the Torah is not always told in chronological order, right? We'll see by the sin of the golden calf. Sin of the golden calf, in the Torah itself is much later. It's written down, chapters later than when it really happened, right? In other words, after God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, Parshas Yisro. After Parshas Yisro, what do I have? Parshas Mishpatim. What's Parshas Mishpatim? Parshas Mishpatim is all about laws of damages, right? It's probably, I think, single most parsha that has the most amount of mitzvahs given. It's all about the laws of damages. And it goes into all that, right? And then eventually gets to the story of the golden calf. The sin of the golden calf, right? The obvious question is, why is the sin of the golden calf over there? Right? Really, it should be at the end of Parshas Yisro, or at least the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, right? The Rashi will say, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's out of order. It just means it was written down that way, right? But that could have been much earlier, right? We can have an event that's much earlier. It's just written down, just written down in the order it was. The Torah itself is not written in chronological order, right? There are many times the Torah alludes to things that didn't happen yet, or it's alluding to places that didn't exist yet, right? It's in Genesis a number of times. Right? So it's talking about the future. Fine. So Rashi can say, not a problem. Why don't I have a problem? Because if the Torah is not written in chronological order, right, then it doesn't matter. right? If it's not written in chronological order, I don't have a question. But it's out of order. It should have been written, much earlier, chapters before. That doesn't negate the fact that it happened then. It just is written down later. It's written down in a later chapter, right? You have to see what the connection is, why it's written down there. But for Rashi, it's not a problem, right? Others may not have an issue with it either. He's not the only one. He's not the only one that holds that. Regardless, right? Here he's telling you, well, the order seems to be significant. In other words, if you're going to tell me all about a male discharge and all that, keep all that together. And then you talk about the female discharge. Then you talk about she gets a period. Then, you talk about the Zav and all that, and you put it all together. But it seems like you're talking about one thing, you get on to another thing, you come back to this, right? It's like going back and forth, right? You start out with verse 2, then you get to verse 16, you get to 19, you go back, you go forwards, then you get to the end. Right? So he's telling you really what the order should be. Right? So he says, according to me, right? He said, if you look at this chapter, that's the way the order should be. Right? That's what he says. That's the way the order should be. But he says, according to me, why did it change? Why did the order seem to change? Right? The Torah doesn't mix up things for no reason. There is a method to the madness, meaning that you can have juxtaposition of verses, and they're significant. They're significant, right? Why you have one verse here, one verse next to it. Right? I'll give you one example before we get to this. I'll give you one example. The Torah tells me a number of times there's an obligation to keep Shabbos. It tells me before the Torah is given. Tells me in Book of Leviticus Chapter 20, right, etc. And then much later, when the Torah is talking about the tabernacle and the building of the tabernacle and all the loops and the boards and the this and the that, then it tells me you got to keep Shabbos. So, first I got to say, what's going on here? My kesher, what's the connection? Seemingly no connection. You're telling me chapter after chapter, loops, clasps, boards, mishkan, this, that. Okay, now all of a sudden you have to keep Shabbos, right? As my Rebbe would say in Yiddish, what's going on here? So Rashi says straight away, what's the juxtaposition of the verses? Juxtaposition of the verses means I have all these verses about telling me about the building of the Mishkan, telling me about the building of the tabernacle and all the boards, the loops, and clasps, and all that. So why does it mention Shabbos? To tell you the laws. Sorry, the building of the Mishkan does not supersede Shabbos. It tells me that it's so crucial that anything that was done in the Mishkan that's done in the tabernacle is going to be forbidden to do on Shabbos. Because when the Torah there tells me you got an obligation to keep Shabbos, it already told me 3 times, 4 times. It already told me before. But so if you're going on verse after verse, chapter after chapter, about the loops, the clasps, and all that, and all of a sudden it says, boom, you got to keep Shabbos. What are you talking about? What's the connection? What's the connection over here? So we see there's a connection. Give one other example. Torah tells me that there's an obligation to honor and respect parents. And what's the verse after that? What does the verse after that tell me? The verse after that tells me that you have to keep Shabbos. What's the connection? So the connection is, even if your parents tell you, they want you to desecrate Shabbos, you don't listen to them. Right? Shabbos comes after this verse, even though the mitzvah is an obligation to honor parents, to respect them. But if they tell you to desecrate Shabbos, you don't listen to them. They'll tell you, it's in the 10 Commandments, honor your parents, you have to listen to what I say. Yeah, but Shabbos also in 10 Commandments. But since I have a juxtaposition of the verse over there, what's the connection between Shabbos and honoring parents? And the answer is, I don't have to honor my parents if they tell me that's a great Shabbos. No obligation. Just the opposite. Honoring your parents, in that case, is not listening to them. Because you're honoring God. And God deserves to be honored first. So we see there's a juxtaposition of verses. There's a connection to what's going on. Comes along Rabbeinu Bachai. And Rabbeinu Bachai says, okay, I would have set up in a different order. But nobody asked me, right? My language, Rabbeinu Bachai says, appears according to me. He says, my opinion, why did the Torah change it over here? Why did the Torah put it in a different order? You want to know why? So he says, according to me, what's the end of the parsha? What's the end of this chapter? It says, Asher Yishkav im Tameya, the one who's going to be with a impure person. Right? Isn't that what it says? Right? It says it concerning a man who lies with an impure woman. What's it talking about? When she got a period. Right? Impurity. Impurity 101. Spiritual cooties, as I would call it. So my boss says, what's the connection? Why does it end with that? Oh, it comes on the Rebbeinu B'chaye. You want to know why? It says at the end of this chapter, it says at the end of Parshas Mitzorah, which we're going to finish. Why is it a mention about impurity over here? Because what's the next chapter? Which we'll see if we get to. If we're going to start it. What's chapter 16, Parshas Acharei Mo start with? God says to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron. Right? When they drew close to God and they died. Death. Right? What does the beginning of the next chapter talk about? The death of the two sons of Aaron. It comes on the Rebbeinu B'chaye and says, why does this chapter end talking about impurity? You know, with the guy who's with a woman when she got a period. Why does it speak about that? Oh, you know why? You know, and why all these things seem to be a little bit out of order? Because I needed to end the chapter over here with impurity. Right? With impurity, when a woman gets a period and the guy's with her. Why do I have to tell me that? Because of the next chapter. What does the next chapter tell me? Next chapter tells me the death of Aaron's two sons. And there's a hint over here, the Rebbeinu B'chaye says. Right? Doesn't say simple explanation. He says it's a hint. It's a hint over here. Why? Because death. Why did they die? A lot of reasons we're going to see why they potentially died. Not of an aviyah, and that we're going to spend a while on. That I guarantee. Why did they die? Sorry. And he says there's a hint over here because their death is when they went into the mikdash. They went into the Beis HaMikdash. They went into the tabernacle over here, which was really before the Beis HaMikdash. They went into the Holy of Holies in impurity. Right? They didn't wash their hands. They didn't wash their feet before they went in. That was their obligation. They didn't do that. They died. And God took them. So now, what do I see? They died because of impurity. The level of impurity over here. There are a number of reasons. There are 6 different reasons. We're going to see that the Talmud gives. Right? That why they died. But over here, what does it say? Over here, there's a hint over here because it says they died through impurity. Oh, if they died through impurity, the end of our chapter talked about impurity. That's the connection. Why? Because that's one of the reasons, as the rabbis of blessed memory bring in the Medrash. Right? They bring in a Medrash, as the Rebbeinu B'chaye says before, chapter 10, verse 1. Right? Chapter 10, verse 1. Right? We'll go way back. Right? What does it speak about over there? Chapter 10, verse 1 tells me that the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan. They put fire in them, placed incense upon it. They brought before Hashem an alien fire, he not commanded. What did God do? Verse 2, fire came forth from before Hashem, consumed them. And they died before God. So why did they die? According to this, they died because they brought fire from incense upon it that they weren't allowed to bring. It was a strange fire they weren't allowed to bring. Right? It says Rebbeinu B'chaye, one opinion is that why did the sons of Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu die? Right? One opinion is they brought a strange fire. They brought a strange fire they weren't allowed to bring. And that's what it says. And that's the verse we just read. Chapter 10, verse 1. Right? They brought the strange fire before God, and then it says, right? In verse 9. And then God brought out this fire. He brought out this fire and he killed them. Right? And he took care of them. So it's clear, at least from that, And why did they die? They brought a strange fire. But there is going to be a level of impurity. We're going to see. Right? One of the reasons is going to be a level of purity. What's another reason? Another reason they died is because they drank wine. They drank wine before they served in the temple. That you're not allowed to do. And also, in that case, how do the rabbis know? How do the rabbis know they drank too much? Right? Before they served. Because again, what does the Torah tell me? The Torah tells me, let's go back. When it says that the fire came out and consumed them, that was verse 2. That was chapter 10, verse 2. But then the Torah tells me in verse 9 that there's a command before you serve God, you're not allowed to drink wine or beer, anything intoxicating. All right, that you're not allowed to do. So seemingly, another reason, right? Potentially why their lives were taken. Some say that they poskin, they gave over Jewish law in front of their Rebbe, in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Someone greater than you, someone asks the question, and your rabbi standing there, and you let him answer. Right? You show honor, you let him answer, even if you know the answer. Right? Because then the Torah tells me in verse 11. Right? Let's go through these verses here, just to make sure I'm not blowing any smoke over here. It says, right? So we saw first, chapter 10, verse 1. Right, sons of Aaron, Nadav and Abihu, took the fire pan, put a fire in them, placed incense upon them, brought before them an alien fire that God did not command. Right, so you have to go back to the class over there. We spoke quite a bit about that. Verse 2, fire came forth, God took them, consumed them, they died before Hashem. Okay, that's verse 2. Now, another reason why they died, potentially they died, it's because they drank wine, right? As it says in verse 9. What does it say in verse 9? Chapter 10, verse 9. It says, Hashem spoke to Aaron saying, don't drink intoxicating wine, you and your sons with you, when you come to the tent of meeting, that you do not die. This is eternal decree for your generations. Now, it would seem from that, what's the reason? Because they drank. Not just because they brought a strange fire. Another potential reason. What's the third reason? Third reason is they gave over a halacha of Jewish law in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now you're going to say, okay, so how do I know? How do I know that has to do with that? Where's the Torah tell me that? So if you look at chapter 10, verse 11, it says to teach the children of Israel all the decrees that Hashem had spoken to them through Moshe. Right? What is the first word in the line? Ulahoros. So here they translate it as teach, right? But they gave over Jewish law. That's what it means. Hora means to give over Jewish law, right? The pasuk in the Shiloh to answer a question, right? So you see over there also, right? Another potential reason why Nadav and Abihu died. Some say, fourth opinion, is that they didn't even get married. They didn't want to get married. And that was based on gaiva. That was based on being haughty, being conceited. Now, if they are considered so great, where's the haughtiness over here? What did they say? All right, let me see where this is brought down. One second here. Let me see if the source is here. It must be from the Gemara, brings it down. It's either the Gemara or the Medrash. Where does it say? How do I know that they were conceited? What do they say? They say, my uncle is the king. Right? Who's their uncle? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the king. My father's the Kohen Gadol. My father's the high priest. Right? My father's the high priest over here. Our mother was the Nazi of the Jewish people, right? Considered the exilarch, whatever you want to call it, of the Jewish people. And we are next in command, the Kohanim. So what did they say? We got all this yichus, we got all this pedigree, all this genealogy. What do they say? What woman is fitting to marry us? I mean, they got the greatest genealogy over here. Their uncle is Moshe Rabbeinu, right? He's considered the king. Their father considered the high priest. They don't get any better than that. So what are they thinking? I mean, this is hard to imagine. You're talking about two incredible individuals, right? But okay, so what do they say? They're going to say, we have such a pedigree. I have such an unbelievable pedigree. Who's worthy to marry me? That's what they said. Then they get married. So therefore they get punished. A fifth opinion is they got too close to Mount Sinai. Right? They got too close to Mount Sinai. And that they died, but God waited until now. Right? Because giving the Torah on Mount Sinai, he didn't want to take them then. Right? There was a command that we're going to read in the next number of weeks, that there was a command not to come too close to the mountain. Right? Not go too far up, whatever the case was. Over there, they got too close, and they deserved the death penalty for that. But God didn't take them then. Because what happened right after that? Mount Sinai. Right? They got the Torah, Mount Sinai. So God did not want to interfere over here. He didn't want to kill them because of the great joy of getting the Torah. And then the Torah tells me, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, that's chapter 16, verse 1, when they came before God. Right? When they came before God. Right? Chapter 16, verse 1. What does that mean? It means they came too close. They came too close to Mount Sinai. Because Moshe Rabbeinu warned everybody. And he said, the priests and the people, etc., Book of Exodus chapter 19, verse 24, they shouldn't get too close to the king. Too close to the mountain. Shouldn't go too far up. There was already a warning. So according to that, they could have died for that. But God just waited to take them till now. He didn't want to take them. He didn't want to take them when he gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. That's the fifth reason. And some say, now back to our original reason there, which we said at the beginning, now he's going to clarify. And he says sixth reason is because they entered the Mikdash Betumah. They went into the tabernacle, the Beis HaMikdash, or what would become the Beis HaMikdash, in impurity. The Kohen is not allowed to enter in impurity. He's liable for death penalty. Now, what does that mean in impurity? What did they do? He said they didn't wash their hands or their feet. And if you don't do that, you're liable for death penalty. As it says, Book of Exodus chapter 30, verse 21. What does it say over there? That they have to wash their hands and their feet, and if they don't, if they have to wash their hands and their feet so they don't die. So we're talking about the Kohanim, right? We're talking about the Kohanim over here. So if the Kohanim don't wash their hands and their feet, when they have to serve, they go into the temple, the tabernacle, whatever it is, liable for death penalty. They should get killed. Therefore, comes along Rabbeinu Bachai, and he says, therefore, our parsha ends, right? The parsha of Mitzorah, chapter 15 over here ends, and it says, a man who sleeps with a woman when she's impure, and then it tells me, Acharei Mois, after the death of Aaron's two sons. So we see, he says there are 6 reasons why they potentially sin. Now, it could be, says Rabbeinu Bachai over here, and we mentioned all of them, right? He says it could be they sinned in every single one of them. Now, you can tell me which one was it. Well, What does the Torah say at the beginning? Chapter 10, verse 1, they brought a strange fire. Maybe it's that reason. But then we see in verse 9, right? You're not allowed to drink wine. Maybe it's that reason. So it could be any one of these reasons. It could be all the reasons. Could be all the reasons over here. And there it says, chapter 10, verse 2, it says, and this fire came out and ate them, right? Consumed them. The Rabbeinu Bachai says, when it says, the word v'ta'oichel is lacking a vav. Right? And here, commentaries go to town. Sometimes there's a word that should have a vav there, and it's missing. Right? Or let's say, there's a consonant missing or something. So they want to prove from that, different things. So here over here he says, well, that word's missing a vav. So there's a hint. What's the hint? The hint is that rabbis tell us at the end of the first chapter in Tractate Yuma, there are 6 fires. There are 6 fires that are mentioned by the temple, etc. So it's a hint over there. Right? It's a hint over there, the Medrash says. Right? In other words, I have a vav. I have a vav that's added over here. Right? So again, if it's added, I can learn certain things. If it's not added, maybe I don't learn certain things. Right? So here the Rabbeinu Bachai sets out a fundamental principle. Fundamental principle is that these verses seem out of order. Seem out of order. He would have put them in a different order. Right? But obviously God didn't ask his opinion. Right? Didn't ask our opinion what order it should be. This is the order that it is. Right? But going back and forth, then what do you do at the end of it? Why is it mentioned over here at the end? Right? Why does the Torah tell me? Why does the Torah tell me about impurity? Why does it end with that? Why does it take it? Turning a man who lies with an impure woman. What does that have to do with anything? Right? Should have mentioned it before. Seems out of place. But the impurity over here is one of the reasons that none of the Nevi'im were killed. That God takes their lives. Why? Because they went in the temple when they shouldn't have. They went in before they washed their hands and their legs, right, and their feet. Based on that, says Rabbeinu Bachai, what do I understand? I understand that there's a connection between the two verses, between the end of the chapter and the beginning of the next chapter. There's a clear-cut reason why. I wouldn't put it there. Rabbeinu Bachai says, I wouldn't put that verse there. I would have put it somewhere else. But even if I would have put it somewhere else, you have to come up with an explanation why the order is the way it is and why the end verse talks about impurity. Right? With the guy being with a woman when she's impure. My cashier. Oh, what's the connection? The next chapter. The death of Aaron's 2 sons. Right? Then he just explains all the potentially different reasons why his 2 sons die. But this is definitely one of them. Right? Then they went into the temple when they were impure. Oh, impurity? Impurity over here? Direct connection. Direct connection. Right? That's what it's doing here. Yeah, I'll take some questions on that. Someone asked, does interactions with siblings count as well as with a wife? I mean, obviously, incest is forbidden. It's even forbidden for non-Jews. Right? It seems to be pretty clear, even though you see, one of the main reasons given for the fight between, I don't know if this is the main reason, what are a possible reason? There's a jealousy between Cain and Abel. And each one, right, there's a question, who'd they marry? Right? So they were born with a twin sister. They're both born with twin sisters. I think Abel had 2 and maybe Cain had 1. I'm not exactly sure, but they married their twin sister. Now, you're going to say, even for Noahites, that's going to be forbidden, right? 100% that's going to be forbidden, right? Nonetheless, it's before the Torah is given. Right? So that's going to be forbidden. So, yeah, incest would be forbidden, but that wasn't the question. The question was someone who's a neither, right? So what about it? Right? The question was interactions with them, right? That was the question. So let's say a sibling, sits somewhere. Let's say a son. Well, I'll make it easy, right? His mother became impure, right? She got a period. She sits down on the sofa, right? Is he allowed to sit on the sofa? Right? She has a status of impurity, right? If it's a younger son, I don't know if that would necessarily apply, right? Certainly by the husband, it would apply, right? But but when it comes to, let's say that's in time of the temple. So let's say a woman, when a woman got a period today, when it came, it comes to her, her kids, there's no forbiddenness over here. She can hug them, she can kiss them, she can pass things to them. It's only by the husband, right? It's only by the husband it becomes forbidden. Certainly not by, not by kids. Certainly not by kids. And it also wouldn't be by a sibling. Let's say mother's brother, she got a period, she can pass things to him, she can, she can give things over to him. That's not a problem. It's only by her husband, right? So that, that level of impurity, it only goes to her husband, not to go to anyone else. All right, it wouldn't go to anyone else. In the time of the temple, that might be a different issue, right? In other words, if she got a period, she sits down on the sofa, right? Seemingly no one can sit on the sofa, right? Because to have impurity, even for her kids, probably, right? Certainly, certainly for her husband, right? That is one. That was one question. How do these interactions affect the convert? So really, there's no status of neither by a non-Jew, right? There are many things of impurity don't apply to a non-Jew. Just about everything, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to a non-Jew. Many things, right? Many things. Where it comes up is once a non-Jew converts. Once a non-Jew converts, then really his siblings are not really their siblings, even though they are by blood, right? And their parents, technically, they're blood related, but spiritually there's no connection, right? So that would mean once a person converts, if I remember correctly, the halacha is that he shouldn't hug his mother, right? A son should not hug his mother. Right? Really shouldn't touch his mother, technically. They're not related, right? They're not related spiritually. Siblings would be the same thing, right? It is brought down. I'll just mention this, by Jews, in general, when it comes to siblings, it is brought down that past a certain age, let's say a brother and a sister, should be alone together. Let's say the parents go away for a couple of days and you have, let's say the sister's 15 and her brother is like 10. They shouldn't be alone together. Someone else should be there. You got to tell me, come on, what could possibly happen? Right? Maybe nothing's going to happen. Right? Girl's responsible, take care of her brother. No big deal. There's a problem though. There is a problem. Right? It shouldn't be done. Someone else should be there. Watching. An adult should be there. Watching them. So, also, past a certain age, brother or sister shouldn't kiss each other or hug each other or whatever. You're going to say, really? Could it lead to that? We know there are cases like such a thing. We're not going to get gross here, but, things can happen. So past a certain age, they shouldn't touch each other, right? In general. Now, if they did, is it forbidden? No. It's not forbidden per se. What happens if they fight and they're like rolling around and this and that? Okay. But they can touch each other, and it's not forbidden for them to touch each other. The question is being alone together. That's the question, right? Can they be alone together, for a few days or whatever? In such a case. So touching each other, passing things around, if a sister got a period or not, that doesn't matter, right? That doesn't matter. The question is really, after a certain age, they really shouldn't, touch each other. Are they allowed to? They are allowed to, right? We're not going to say no. They are allowed to, right? But again, a convert. Let's keep in mind, converts, once they convert, they're not related. They're not related to the parents. Now, if the parents die, what about sitting Shiva, right? It's a common question. What about mourning for them? Are there mourning customs? And what's the simple answer? No, there are no mourning customs, right? You don't say Kaddish. You don't really do anything. If a person wants, they want to sit for a couple of days through some of the customs, maybe. But in general, there are no mourning customs. They're not related to. Right now, this is a little bit of a hard thing, especially, child close to a parent. They want to mourn like a Jew should mourn. But even if they're a Jew, the parents aren't. We don't mourn for non-Jews. That's not what's done. In the secular world, I guarantee, that this is a no-brainer. A guy is married to a woman, right? We'll make it easy. Guy's married to a Jew is married. What I meant to say is the Jew is married to a non-Jewish woman, right? Or vice versa. It doesn't really matter, right? And the non-Jewish spouse dies. Now, what is that Jew going to do? He'll probably sit Shiva. Now, normally sitting Shiva means 7 days. You don't sit Shiva on Shabbos. There's certain things you can't do, right? If you're in mourning. So the custom in America is like a day or day and a half, maybe 2 days maximum, right? Secular Jews mourn for a loved one, whether it's a parent, spouse, God forbid, a child, right? Right. The mourning customs for a parent are 11 months, really 12 months, right? You're in mourning. For a spouse or a child or, a sibling, it's 30 days. Right. But the 7-day mourning period is the same for everybody, unless there's a holiday in between, whatever. We're not going to get too complicated. Right. But the Shiva period, the 7-day period, is the same for all these things. Right. So what do they do in the States? In other places? States is not unique over here. What do? They sit for 2 days. Maybe a day and a half, 2 days maximum. Oh, what happened to 7 days? Now that's too much. Right. So now, depending where the person is holding, if he's a little more traditional, He'll sit Shiva for a couple of days, right? He'll do what everyone else does. He'll sit for 2 days for a non-Jew. I mean, I don't want to get tragically morbid over here, but there's no Indian, there's nothing. There are no mourning customs over here. The person's not Jewish. When's the last time you ever heard someone mourns for a non-Jew? I say the mourner's prayer for a non-Jew. You can say, well, it can't hurt. Not a question if it can't hurt or not. Right? The question is they don't have the same soul and the same soul makeup. So saying Kaddish, what does it do? Saying the mourner's prayer, what does it do? Doesn't do anything. Same way, doesn't do anything. Right? Again, this might seem a little bit harsh. Right? But, mourning customs are for Jews. Specifically for Jews, not for non-Jews. But, these parents raised you, this and that. And I'm not saying they were evil or whatever. Let's say you really love them and you're close to them, and we'll make it very easy. There's still no mourning customs. They're not related to you, technically. There's no relation, spiritually speaking. So in that case, there are certain laws that apply. Right? One of them is going to be that if you have a Jew married to a non-Jew, the non-Jew dies. Okay, it's tragic, right? Non-Jew dies. No mourning customs. If you convert, right? If you convert, so the parents really technically not your parents. Now you have to show them respect, different things. But really, spiritually speaking, they're not related to you. If they're not related to you, then technically we could say that a lot of other laws apply. Can a son be alone with can a convert son be alone with his mother? They're not related anymore. That's one issue. Is he allowed to touch her, hug her? Another issue. Definitely another issue. Right? So the question was, right, about interaction with family, with siblings. Yeah, these things are going to come to play. A Jew, we'll say like this. Somebody that has, let's say a whole bunch of siblings, and these siblings get married. Now, what about, let's say a religious family. So person's got 3, 4 brothers, whatever it is. They're married to women. So now these sister-in-laws, how much contact does the brother-in-law have? They'll have contact. Not like, you're never going to say hello to them. You're not going to talk to them, but contact should be, minimally in different ways. Why? Things can happen. Things have happened. Let's just say. I'm not saying you ignore them. I'm not saying you never speak to them. There's a reason. There's a reason these laws are the way they are. And there's a reason why, a person doesn't have so much contact with someone of the opposite sex if they don't have to. There's a reason. There's good reason. And in family where you're more chummy, you're more open and different things. Right? So, you don't have in general sister-in-laws calling up brother-in-laws or this and that or vice versa. Sometimes you do, but I'm just saying that contact like that, you're not going to have. You do it through your spouse, right? And they'll do it. Doesn't mean you don't speak to them, doesn't mean you ignore them, right? But contact is relatively minimal in general. Just like contact should be between people of the opposite sex for that reason. For exactly that reason. You don't want to have any issues. You don't want to have any issues. Now, some people I think may take it a little more to an extreme, to a certain extent, but there's good reason why these halachas definitely exist. Someone asked, is there any Torah explanation as to why women have bad moods and pain during that time? Yeah, we mentioned the Rebbe Chai said clear. Mention it, well before we spoke about that. It's the curse of Eve. That's exactly the curse, right? In other words, she ate from the tree. There were a number of things she got cursed with. One is difficulty in childbirth, right? One is, she never would have got her period in general had she not eaten from the tree, right? That's what the Medrash says. She had difficulty raising children, and she's subservient to her husband in different ways. There are a lot of curses over here, in one shot. So what's the reason? That's the reason. Because she ate from the tree, right? 100%, a different tree. That she ate from the tree, and the punishment comes from that, right? So mood swings and other things, PMS and all that comes from that. That's where it stems from, right? You say, but it's a natural thing. Okay, so where did it come from? So Rebbe Chai brings down a medrash. He brings down a medrash and says it's part of the curse. That's all part of the curse. So any women have, get extreme PMS, other things. Who do they blame it on? That's what you blame it on. It's her fault. A woman never would have got a period. She would have had, natural birth. It wouldn't have hurt. She would have been impure. Nothing. But she ate from the tree. Right? It's part of the punishment. About staying in different rooms, we mentioned also that, in the time of the temple, she probably had not just a separate room, probably almost like a separate house, a totally separate area because everything she sits on is impure. Right? Anything she touches seemingly is impure. She can use it, but her husband can't. Right? So yeah, they had, seemingly separate quarters. Someone asked, does our married and live in idolatry help our parents anyway after death? No. Normally we would say if a child goes in the right, goes in the right path, even the parents don't, it's a merit for the parent. Definitely a merit for the parent, right? It can help a parent, no question, even if the parent does, right? They'll get, let's say, somebody has a whole bunch of kids, grandkids, and all that. So it's a tremendous merit for the parent. In this case, if a non-Jew is involved in idolatry, and they're liable for a death penalty, they don't have a portion of the world to come. So even if they come out of idolatry, it doesn't seem like that should happen. If a Jew becomes a religious Jew, and they weren't religious before, that's tremendous merit for the parent. I don't think it works the same way for a non-Jew. Someone asks, are there any substitutes for a person who has no access to a mikvah? They want to purify themselves. Yeah, you could go to a lake, go to a body of water, right? You go to the ocean. I know someone that was in the middle of nowhere. There was, I think, the nearest mikvah, I think, was like 2-3 hours, at least by car. And so his wife used to go to the mikvah in the ocean. And I think once she almost it was like so cold, like she almost got hypothermia or something. So that was the end of that. But a body of water, if you have an ocean nearby, that's good. That's good for purification. A swimming pool is not going to help. Someone wants asked me this question. That's an interesting question, though. Someone asked, and I actually wasn't, I wasn't involved in conversion back then. It was like I was first married or engaged, and someone had asked, what do you think about using a swimming pool for a mikvah? There's a problem with the filter and whatever, but I think they mentioned, if I remember correctly, they had mentioned that's what they do for conversion. I think they use a swimming pool or something. I don't know. I think they said for conversion, if I remember correctly. So yeah, swimming pool's no good. Definitely is no good. A natural body of water is good. Would be good for that. Does a mikvah immersion apply to no-eyes? No, doesn't apply to them. When a non-Jew converts, they'll go to the mikvah. That applies, right? For a non-Jew, there's no status of impurity in general by a non-Jew. So why would they do it? They want extra holiness, right? That only applies to Jews. That doesn't apply to non-Jews. Someone asks, does that apply to therapy? Yeah. Well, let's say someone was in therapy. Good question. Let's say, or someone goes to a doctor, right? It's probably more common, but therapy also. A woman goes to a doctor, right? She goes to a male doctor. Now, if the door is closed, right? Then if it's possible, anybody can walk in at any time. That would be okay. That 100% would be fine. Why? Because anyone can walk in. If the door is locked, right, from the inside, right, that'd be more of a problem. That would be more of a problem. There are some people, I don't think it's the majority, but there are some people, that go with their wives to doctor's appointments, for that reason, for exactly that reason. But usually since anyone can really come in at any time, that's okay. There is a leniency. We'll just clarify this leniency also, that, if a woman's married and her husband's in the city, right? He's nearby, 20 minutes away, half an hour away, whatever it is. Plumber comes to the house. Now, she knows her husband, even though he's in the city, he's close by, he's not coming home till 8 o'clock. Plumber's there at, 10 o'clock in the morning. He's not coming home till 8 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, right? He's not going to be around. No one else is around, right? So you can't say, well, my husband's in the city, I can use that leniency. I don't need to open the door. Not true. Right? In that case, that leniency won't apply. that leniency definitely won't apply. If this woman would call a neighbor and say, I want you to, pop in, sporadically, like between this time, whatever, okay, right? So that would take down the problem as well. But in general, if the door is shut, she got a plumber there, whatever the case is, the problem being alone. There's also a case where some people may think this is strange. Let's say a woman gives birth, right? A person's wife gives birth. And also, we'll say better. Let's say at night, if someone's alone with someone else of the opposite sex, you have kids at home. So, if kids are awake and around and this and that, fine. If they're little kids and they're asleep, that's a problem. Because, most likely they're not going to wake up. Right? So that'd be another issue. Or let's say, case I was going to give, let's say, somebody's married, his wife gives birth, and the mother-in-law stays. The mother-in-law comes and helps out. And she's staying in your house. Right? She's staying in your house. There's no one else there. You got a problem being alone. So either you have to bring in, some kids over the age of bar mitzvah, right? And, they have to stay with you at least overnight till your wife gets back. Or you have to leave the door open, right? Or seemingly you have to leave the door open, because if you don't do that, then you got a problem. You got a problem being alone. You tell me, your mother-in-law is 75 and whatever, and nothing would ever happen. Doesn't matter, right? There's a problem with being alone. Right, so that would be forbidden. So now someone asks, so what about therapy? Now, therapy, if it's someone of the opposite sex, yeah, it'd be the similar issue. Be the exact same issue as going to a doctor. Right? If someone can walk in at any time, right, the door is not locked, then you don't have an issue. Right? Because people come in and out. People potentially come in and out. The door is locked, different issue. Now, get to another issue. What about, a woman goes to a doctor, he touches her. Okay, but it's for the sake of medicine over here. He's not, I remember my wife had a problem with her foot with an ingrown toenail. So she went to see a podiatrist, right? So he said, am I allowed to touch your foot? He said, well, how are you going to heal it if you don't? Like, how are you going to take care of it if you don't touch it? Like, you didn't know. We had no idea. Right? But, something like that, yeah. It's definitely permissible because it's for the sake of medicine. Now, if we're going to talk about, let's say, a gynecological exam, right? Is a woman allowed to go to a male doctor? She's allowed to. Some people say it's better to go to a woman doctor. I don't think there's any question about that, right? But that's his profession. That's what he does, right? So being alone, not an issue. And again, as long as someone can come in or whatever, it's common. It's common that a woman has a male doctor. Is it better to have a female doctor for a woman? Yeah, 100%. You don't feel comfortable with a female doctor. You have a male doctor. Okay, right? Yeah, as long as somebody else is there. It's as long as the door is open. Because if the door is closed, then you get a problem. It doesn't matter, if the husband's in the city or not. He can pop in at any time. He's not going to, right? Even if there are other people, in the waiting room, that doesn't really matter. If the door is locked, forbidden, right? Totally forbidden, right? So that would apply to a doctor. That would apply to a therapist. No different, right? Absolutely no different. There would be an issue. Just throw this out there as well. There would be an issue. Let's say someone gets a massage. Someone gets a massage. Guys should get a massage from a guy, not from a woman, right? I think that makes sense. Someone asks, converts considered orphans after conversion, and then they're considered like a newborn baby. That means everything they've done previously gets wiped out. If their parents aren't Jewish, they're considered orphans. I mean, not technically, no. Technically, no, because the parents still alive, they're still blood relatives. Spiritual orphans, yeah. Because now they have no connection. They have no spiritual connection over here. So I would definitely say that. But I would say, there are people, let's say, they're Jews and they become religious, and basically, they have little connection to their family, to the parents. They're also like orphans, even though they are totally related, right? No one had a funny conversion or any of these other things, right? So what happened? They had they're blood related. They stay blood related. There's no issue. But spiritually speaking, I would say 100% they're orphans, totally orphans, right? They're spiritual orphans. Is a non-Jewish spiritual orphan? Sorry, if it's a convert, a spiritual orphan, yeah, nothing to talk about. No, technically speaking, you're right. Parents aren't your parents. So if your parents aren't your parents, what does that mean? It means, it means in a spiritual sense, right? And there are repercussions for that. In a physical sense, yeah, they are your parents. But, if they're Bible thumpers and anti-Semites and other things. So, spiritually speaking, you have no connection in that sense, right? You are going to be an orphan in that sense. So, you got secular Jews become religious, that's the same thing. Except for the fact that parents stay biologically their parents, right? I mean, by non-Jew also, just spiritually, it's a different thing, right? But it can be the same thing. It can be the exact same thing. It can have no spiritual connection whatsoever. So you also feel like an orphan, Could feel like a physical orphan or a spiritual orphan. Someone asked if all bad is wiped out, is all good wiped out? Now, why would that be? If someone did something, as a non-Jew, that's good. They help Granny cross the street. That doesn't get wiped out, right? It's only, you want the negative to get wiped out, because most non-Jews, unless they repent, they're liable for a death penalty for any number of things, because all these laws are universal, right? So there are many things that are going to be liable for a death penalty. So you want all the evil wiped out. You don't want the good wiped out. The good stays, right? Even if a non-Jew doesn't convert, all the good things they do, they get married for. 100% they get married for, right? So the good also, the good's going to stay. The bad, for sure, you want wiped out, right? There's no question. Now, it's interesting. You bring that up. So what about, someone did something wrong as a non-Jew, they convert. Technically speaking, they did something wrong. Let's say they owe money to someone or whatever the case is. Technically, once they convert, everything's wiped out. Everything is totally wiped out. So they're going to say, so I don't know the debt. No. So, going beyond the letter of the law, yeah, you really should pay it back. You really got an obligation to pay it back. People say by bankruptcy, a person owes money, right? Guy stole all my money, went bankrupt, right? Now he's no longer in this world, but he went bankrupt. So someone told me, okay, he went bankrupt, he can't pay. According to the Torah, he's still liable to pay. Doesn't matter where he gets it from. He still has to pay. Bankruptcy doesn't matter. Technically, according to the courts and law and this and that, he's not liable. Well, we don't care what the law says here. We care what the Torah says. Torah says he's liable, right? He's 100% liable over here. So if a person, let's say, stole money or whatever the case is before they converted, after conversion, technically that gets wiped out, but they should pay it. They should definitely pay it. Is the children of a convert considered a mamzer? No. Children of a convert are Jews. They're 100% Jews. And let's say a parent converts. This can't happen. Let's say a parent converts and the child doesn't. Child's not interested in conversion. Okay. No one says they have to convert. Right? If the mother was Jewish before the child is conceived, or even after the child's conceived, but the woman's Jewish when she gives birth, then the child de facto is Jewish. But let's say a person converts later in life. They already have kids. The kids aren't Jewish. So the kids are not considered mamzerim. That's a forbidden relationship, right? A child is only a mamzer by a forbidden relationship between a man and a woman. That child is called a mamzer because that relationship was forbidden, right? So therefore, children of a convert are not mamzerim. Children of a convert, they're Jews, right? They're really Jews, right? If they don't convert, right? If you had them before you converted, which we mentioned, right? They're not mamzerim. It's not a forbidden relationship, right? You know, a non-Jew and a non-Jew is not a forbidden relationship. Non-Jew with a Jew is a different issue, right? That's a different issue, right? We'll just make it clear. A woman who's Jewish is with a non-Jewish guy. The child technically is Jewish. That's how we hold, right? But the Talmud says a number of things here. The Talmud says the child is blemished. That's one opinion. The Talmud says another opinion that child's a mamzer. Right? In the end, we don't hold that. We hold that the child is Jewish. We go according to the mother, not the father. Or I go according to matrilineal descent. But that being the case, if the person converted later on in life, child's not a mamzer. Child's just a non-Jew. So that, and what if they don't convert? So they don't convert. I will say that a person that has older children, a rabbinical court may not allow them to convert if the child doesn't want to convert, until the children are out of the house. Because then it's going to be a little bit dicey. Dicey in the sense that here you have the parents keeping Torah mitzvahs, keeping Shabbos, keeping kashrus, and you got these kids, running around, not keeping Shabbos, not keeping kosher. It's a mess. So there are rabbinical courts that will say that parents will not be able to convert until the kids are out of the house. You have to wait until the kids are out of the house. And once the kids are out of the house, they can convert because it causes a lot of problems. A lot of problems. Now we will mention that, a child, in this case, does not have to convert. They're under no obligation. Totally no obligation. If they want to convert, fine. And I always tell people, if your kids go with you in the process, very good. If they don't, then that's something you have to live with. Now, it could be, as we mentioned, there will be an issue. The rabbinical court may say, we're not going to convert you until they're out of the house. Because there's too many problems. Too many problems. Right? But they don't have the status of mamzerim. And they wouldn't have the status of mamzerim because that applies to Jews. It doesn't apply to non-Jews. Right? If they're born, the mother's Jewish, converted. So, that child obviously will be considered Jewish. They send to Jewish schools, and by the time they're bar mitzvah, 12 or 13, the Beis Din, the rabbinical court may ask the child, do you want to still go in this path or not? They have to give them a choice. Right? But if they're going in the right path anyway, and seemingly, they may not ask them. But in general, once they're Jewish, fine. Once the parents are Jewish, they have a child, the child's Jewish. But beforehand, they're not Jewish. They're not mamzerim either. They're not considered from a forbidden relationship. Right? It's not a problem with a forbidden relationship for a non-Jew over here. Right? I'm talking about two non-Jews. Right? If it's a forbidden relationship according to the Noahide laws, that's a different issue. Right? There are immorality laws by non-Jews. Even though, some idiot crackpot moron comes out and says, yeah, it's no problem of what do you call it? Of adultery by a non-Jew. By the Noahide laws, no such thing. Yeah, non-Jew can commit adultery. Did you ever read the Rambam on the topic? No. It's forbidden. Liable for death penalty. That's a death penalty prohibition. Right? I always say you got to be careful who you listen to. But someone who tells you as a non-Jew, you're married, you can commit adultery, yeah, think again. That's forbidden. That's 100% forbidden. Somebody asks, what if the potential convert is a product of second cousins? When neither the father or mother were second cousins. The second cousins by technicality. That's permissible. Right? Even Jews are allowed to marry first cousins. There are cases of Jews, marrying first cousins, or second cousins or whatever. Right? Potential. It's not an issue for them. There are cases where that's the case, where they have married first cousins. Right? So in this case, someone asks potential convert the product of second cousins. Yeah, that's not a problem. That's not a forbidden relationship. Forbidden relationship, obviously incest, other things. Other things. So the second cousin's not a forbidden relationship. Right? Definitely not a forbidden relationship, so that would be okay. Yeah. But there are, let's make clear, there are forbidden relationships for non-Jews. Right? Adultery being one of them. Incest being another one. Cousins, not an issue. I mean, by Jews, not an issue. Right? It's brought down that, a special relationship is between an uncle and a niece. Right? I don't think too many uncles marry their niece today, but on the books, permissible. Permissible. I don't think it's in vogue today. Right? I don't think people do it, but non-Jews have clear cuts, things that are forbidden when it comes to immorality, or when it comes to forbidden relationships. Not everything goes over here for non-Jews, and don't let anyone tell you adultery is okay. It's not. Period. It's not okay. Right? So, there are a lot of things I think that people really need to learn. I'm not saying people can't ask questions, but questions are good. I think people make assumptions that are bad, that are just off the wall, that don't make any sense. So a person says, yeah, you wouldn't be considered excluded from converting. No. Again, there's no, let's make clear. Let's make clear. There's no mamzer status for a non-Jew. It doesn't apply. There are forbidden relationships for non-Jews. But that doesn't mean that offspring can't convert. I mean, we mentioned, I think a few weeks back, a woman who's a product of a union where the parents did not practice family purity laws. She's what we call a bas nida, right? Which probably very many Jews probably have that status. So Me'erbri brings down that there was a question that he asked to the Chazon Ish. Rav Avraham Yeshaya Karelitz of blessed memory, the famous Chazon Ish. And he asked him this question, about somebody who comes from this status, right? And it's a negative status because the woman didn't go to the mikvah. So negative status, many repercussions. Should someone who's, and this person became a Baal Tshuva, very, very strong in Torah mitzvahs and all that. Should this guy marry this woman? Is there an issue marrying this woman? And the Chazon Ish said just the opposite. If she's working on herself and she's growing, and this is what she wants, then yeah, that can overcome that impurity. That can overcome that blemish. Sorry, let's say better. That blemish. So not an issue. Right? Not an issue. Someone asked, will bankruptcy hinder someone being converted? Not necessarily. Obviously, it's going to be on a person's record, but what does the rabbinical court want to see? That a person's stable. They can pay their bills. It doesn't mean they live in the lap of luxury. Doesn't mean they don't have ups and downs, but they want to see that they're not going to be a burden to us. Someone's not going to convert looking for money from us. Now, if a person converts, they get into trouble, different things, Jewish community should help them. Right? But if we're going to help them before conversion, every Tom, Dick, and Harry's going to want to convert. Now, I had someone take me to task for saying this. And it's very unpopular, but why is that our issue? I'm not saying people aren't legit. People don't have, people who want to convert, they're not serious. We're not saying that. Right? But I had someone, chew me out. Someone who's on disability and they can't afford to move. And they're so serious and blah, 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 that the Jewish community, that was the language, the Jewish community owes them. We should help them move. We should help them this, help them that. So my answer was, move to a Jewish community, somehow get to a Jewish community, and then roll the dice and see what happens. But why are you going to be a charity case to us? We have our own charity case. We got plenty. Let the non-Jews deal with that. Oh, this person chewed me out left and right. You're going to pay, and you're going to this, and you're going to that. Totally cursed me out. Okay? But no one's going to convert you. No one's going to convert you. Now, it doesn't mean, some people may say, okay, you want to move to the Jewish community, you need X amount of money to live, right? If you have kids, education, kosher food, yeah, it's not cheap. It's definitely not cheap. There's no question. But that being the case, A person moves to the Jewish community, they run into, a hard time. They declare bankruptcy and this and that. It doesn't mean they can't convert. But, a Basin's going to want to make sure that a non-Jew is not a burden to us in the process of conversion. After conversion is a different issue. Right? Bankruptcy is not going to be an issue. What about, let's say better. What if they're convicted felon? A friend of mine deals with converts. He had a woman, right? She was a prostitute before. I think she ended up converting in the end. Very serious, totally turned her life around. We're going to say, a person like that can't convert. You have to see. The basin has to see where the person's holding, what they're doing. But that's not a factor. Bankruptcy should not be a factor. They want to make sure a person's stable. That's all they want to see is a person stable. Okay, people go through hard times. But people have to understand, again, I'll get in trouble for saying this, but that's okay, even though this isn't controversial issues. Regardless, people will say, we deserve to be helped. So I'm going to ask the following question. To what extent? To what extent? Do we, the Jewish people, again, this won't be popular, it won't be PC. Do we, the Jewish people, owe non-Jews anything in the process of conversion in general? Do we owe them anything? No, we don't owe them anything. You want to convert, you come to us, you come on our terms, not your own terms. Now, again, I'm just pointing out that these things may not hinder a person, but a basin is going to want to see the whole picture. Person that bankruptcy, let's say, they're 2 years into bankruptcy, they're getting back slowly on their feet. Okay. Or maybe they're not, maybe they're still struggling, whatever the case is. But they're going to have to show. They're going to have to show they can move to a Jewish community, and they're somewhat self-sufficient. It doesn't mean they have to have a lot of money in the bank. It doesn't mean a lot of things. What it means is we don't want more burdens that we already have. Now, that's not very popular to say. It's not. At the same time, non-Jews, and I mention this all the time, and I have to keep mentioning it because people don't get the message. And that is, when you come to a base, when you come to the Jewish community, I think this is Aleph base, right? I think this is very simple. You're coming to us, you're not making conditions. If you went into the church, you say, I want to be born again, right? I want to convert, whatever it is. But you know what? You're not putting water on me. I'm allergic to water. I'm not going to a bathtub. I'm not going to the ocean. I want you to, look the other way and, let me convert. Maybe they'll let you do that. But they'll probably say, come on, this is part of the process. You go to the mosque and you say, yeah, I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And you're going to declare what you want to do. The mosque, what's the imam going to tell you? You deserve to die anyway. You're an infidel. Like, you're coming to me? You're coming to me, opening your mouth, saying, I deserve this, I deserve that. What in the world do you deserve over here? I deserve the Torah should be easier for me. I heard someone tell me this. I hammered them. I said, okay, what should we take away? What should we make easier? Kashrus. Okay, we'll take away kashrus. Holidays. Oh, we'll take away some of the holidays. I don't like Rosh Hashanah anyway. Okay, we'll take away this, we'll take away that. Where do you draw the line? And even if I would agree, which I wouldn't, but even if I would agree, is that going to work? You're going to be able to pass that down to the next generation? Probably not. Right? It doesn't work. Right? But to me, it's just ironic that, there are people think I can do what I want, when I want, and I'm the one calling the shots. And that's not true. And the Jewish people, let's make clear, non-Jews should be helped to a point. I definitely agree. But if we're throwing out all this money to non-Jews, you're going to have a lot of other unscrupulous non-Jews coming in because they're getting money. They're being helped. Right? They have to show some level of self-sufficiency. Right? We got our own charity case. We got plenty. Again, it doesn't mean that, person doesn't struggle or different things, but they want to see that also a person's not necessarily going to be a burden. Right? A burden to the Jewish community. Someone asks, if non-Jews live together, according to the Rambam, In others, that's called marriage. That's what we call in the states, we call common law marriage. According to some states, not all states hold by common law marriage. We call that common law marriage. Do you need to go in front of justice of the peace? Do you need a piece of paper? No. For Noahide, that's considered marriage. Right? You want to walk away? That's considered divorce. But that's considered marriage over here. Right? Sorry, misread the question. Is that considered adultery? If they live together? No. It's not considered adultery. If, let's say, they are considered married at that point. Let's say. Right? If they're considered married, if they live together, common law marriage, and then either one has a fling with someone else, right? If they have a fling with someone else, so that's adultery. That'd be considered adultery, right? Because technically, according to Noahide laws, they're married. They're with somebody not allowed to be with, right? That would be a forbidden relationship, right? If that would be the case, right? It's not two people who are committed or don't live together yet. The question is if they're committed or not, right? If they're living together, then they're not just shacking up with each other. It's not just like a one-night stand. They're living together. Tell me they're not living together, different issue. All right, they're not living together. Who says it's necessarily a forbidden relationship? Maybe it's, if it's not a forbidden relationship, then I would say there's a moral imperative. I would call it a moral imperative. Because if they're together, they're intimate, it's not a forbidden relationship. Who says they should do that anyway? In general. So it's more based on a moral imperative than anything else. That's what it is. That's what I would call it. Is it adultery? Adultery is very specific. It has to do with a forbidden relationship, right? Forbidden relationship. Yeah. So I get it. So someone who lives together, boyfriend, girlfriend, right? They live together usually, right? And statistically, if they get married after they live together for a while, they end up getting divorced at a high rate, very high rate. I think it's like 75% or higher. The people who live together, end up, and they get married, they end up getting divorced. Victor Miller, blessed memory, once said, how do you end a great romance? Get married. Why would they get divorced at a higher rate? Because now you're getting everything for free. Now all of a sudden you have a piece of paper. It's not as fun, right? It's not as enjoyable over here. So if they, eventually live together, right? If they eventually live together, according to the Noahide laws, they're considered married, right? Why are they considered married, right? Let's analyze that for a second. Why would they be considered married? Because why are they living together? Right? I'm not going to be gross here. They're not living together just for sex. Maybe they are. Could be. Right? In other words, they're not doing it just for that. They're doing it for other reasons as well. I mean, if that's the only reason, then I don't know if they're going to stay together that long. But, at the end of the day, a person's normally not going to do that if there's more stability to the relationship. If it's only based on that, the Gemara says the person's not going to do that. Right? A person's definitely not going to do that because, as the Gemara says, a person's not going to be intimate with someone just for that. You're not going to do that. All the more so if they're living, you want to tell me it's a one-night stand, one thing, or a two-night stand, whatever. You want to tell me they're living together, they're not living together for the sake of just, right? It's more like they're married. But you tell me, come on, the boyfriend, girlfriend. Okay. I'm telling you according to the Noahide laws. Right? According to Noahide laws, they can consider married in such a case. Right? Because they're not doing it just for that. Right? They're doing it because they want to be together. Right? They act like husband and wife. There are plenty of people, unfortunately, Jews that, live together, they don't get married. But technically speaking, they're like husband and wife. They just don't have the piece of paper. For a Jew, it's different. But for a non-Jew, you don't need that. Non-Jew doesn't need a piece of paper. They can live together, common law marriage, right? 100% common law marriage. In the secular world, I just heard someone say today. I was listening to something today. Someone said, I think in New York, I think 80% of the people in New York are not married, just single. Even they're living together, whatever, not married. I think he said 80%. I don't know, is it New York City? I forget it, or is it New York State, in the entire state? I don't remember. I don't remember. But it was like an astronomical number. People are not getting married. And now it makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Why? Because marriage most of the time ends up in divorce in the secular world. What's the divorce rate? It's over 50%, probably closer to 60%. Right? You live together, it's over 75% if you get married, the divorce rate. So the institute of marriage today doesn't work. It doesn't work. Because the majority of the time you're going to get divorced. Definitely doesn't work. So better not to get married. Right? Okay, you live together, it doesn't work out, fine. But, that for a non-Jew, that'd be considered divorce. But in general, makes sense why people want to get married. It also makes sense in a certain way. People don't want to have kids. And in certain places in Europe and other places, they're going to have serious problems in the next 30, 40 years. Because they're not going to have, they're not going to have a population to perpetuate. Basic things are not going to get done because they're not going to have enough people. I heard in China now they're telling people to have more kids, giving incentives to have more kids. To go for years and years they can only have one kid. Now they're worried that people aren't going to have kids. And they're not going to have a second generation. Who's going to clean the streets? Who's going to do other things? It's an issue, right? In some places it's a real serious issue. So, it makes sense. I would say technically it does make sense why most people wouldn't get married. Because it doesn't work. The institution today doesn't work. Totally doesn't work. But I was listening to this earlier. I heard that and I was like shocked. I was like, okay, I understand people aren't getting married. Whatever, but I mean, it's a huge number. Huge number. Or tell me 40%, 50%. I mean, it's a huge number, but it makes sense. It makes logical sense. A person's lucky if they have kids if they do get married. And if they do get married, be lucky if you have grandkids. I know, some friends of my in-laws, kids didn't get married. Or relatives. The kids didn't, one got married, got divorced. And the other two never got married. I think one of them's in their early 60s, one in their, I don't know, late 50s or something. Never got married. This woman, in her 80s, mid 80s, never have grandkids. She'll never see grandkids. It's tragic. Unfortunately, and there are a lot of people like that. A lot of people like that. So I would say that's the trend that's becoming the norm. Getting married, oh, that's already a big thing. Marry someone of the opposite sex, oh, that's even bigger. That's even bigger. But divorce rate, yeah, it's through the roof. It's through the roof. And that's, unfortunately, to me that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Why that's the case. We live in a very selfish generation also. And the whole point, if someone's married is to give to someone else. Right? The Gemara says this is a very hard thing. The Gemara says that a husband has to love his wife more than himself. But I think I mentioned this over Shabbos. That doesn't exist. Who loves anyone more than themselves? In that sense, we're all narcissists. My life comes first before anyone else. Isn't that true? People say I do anything for my kids. Is that true? It's also true. But somebody loves somebody more than themselves. Yeah, that's what men have to be taught. They have to give of themselves and even beyond. Even things they wouldn't normally do for themselves. They should do for their spouse. Even they wouldn't do it for themselves. Right? But again, I'm just talking about technical definition here. Someone has said that to me. Before I got married, they said, when you get married, you have to love your wife more than yourself. I'm like, no. What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Who loves me more than myself? Nobody. I can have all the fans in the world. I love me more than anybody else. Right? I'm going to love someone else more than myself. That's a big novelty. But, there's a lot of wisdom behind it. Tremendous amount of wisdom behind it. It's true people in the early 1900s got married after bat mitzvah. Like there's some people got married, like, I know someone, they're already in their mid-70s. They got married, I don't know, they got married at like 15, 15, 16. Some people got married younger just so, they couldn't be taken away or raped or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what the stats are of what the percentage, of people, like that. But, I can tell you the 20, let's say in the 30s, 40s, people got married much younger. Women got married much younger. My mother got married at 19. I mean, a lot of people, in that generation got married, their late teens, their early 20s, something like that. That's what they did. And who took over from that? We did. Orthodox Jews. That's when women get married, 19, 20, 21, whatever it is, they get married younger. Right? Today, lucky if women get married at all. If anybody gets married, get married when they're in their, 19, 20, come on. Let them see the world. Let them make money, let them this, by the time they're like, okay, they're mid-20s, they'll think about getting married, maybe. And then it becomes harder to meet someone, the biological clock ticks, a lot of things going on. It makes more sense definitely to get married younger, right? But you got to be prepared also, right? But you got a whole system set up for people that, that are prepared, to get married younger and take responsibility and this and that. And that's why, 95% or more of Orthodox marriages work for that reason. Now, you might tell me, there are more Orthodox Jews getting divorced today. Could be, right? Maybe the statistic, maybe up to 10%, maybe, maybe that's the case, but you're not close to 60%, not even. Not even, and there are definitely self precautions and different things that are in the system itself to make sure it doesn't happen for a lot of different things, in a lot of different ways. The system does work. The secular world, it doesn't work at all. It's not even close. I had someone once tell me, say, see, Orthodox, marriages, more Orthodox marriages ended up in divorce. Okay, even if that's true, we're not even, I don't even think we're at 10%. I'll be generous and say 10%. I don't think it's that high. I don't think it's that high. But let's say it's 10%. That means in the secular world, 6 to 7 times more chance of getting divorced than in my world. So what did someone answer? It's cognitive dissonance. See, they're still rising. The stats are still rising. Come on. You have a 7 or 8 times greater chance of getting divorced in the secular world than in my world. That's what the stats show. You want to say they're rising in my world? You can say that, but that's not really what the point was. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say about that. And people can say what they want. They're too young. They're this. They're that. But you know what? I had someone, a couple of years ago, come to my house, meet my family. I have 15 people in my family, 16 now. Gonna add. Right? A whole bunch of grandkids. You see something like that from one person, how can you not be impressed? Okay, it's a lot of noise, you gotta wear earplugs, but how are you not be impressed by that and see that? I know someone became a grandfather the first time, 62, 63. 63. You're gonna say, wow, that's not so bad. That's not so bad. Yeah. So, my oldest got married at 18. Right? She got married at 18, so you're talking 8 years ago. So eight years ago, I was in my early 40s. Grandfather in my early 40s. In the secular world, that almost doesn't exist. Pretty much doesn't exist. Almost in all aspects of the secular world. The benefit, there's no question. There's no question. What they say, if we would have known how great grandkids are, we would have had them first. Doesn't work that way biologically, but they come, they make the mess, they leave. Also benefit. Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, this is a topic going for a long time. It's what's out there, and unfortunately, there are women that get destroyed by the system. because they're told to see the world, to do this, to do that. And then by the time they want to get married, who are they going to marry? How are they going to meet someone to get married? And what if they, they got an MA, they got a PhD. Now, it's going to be beneath them to marry someone who's, doing whatever. Beneath them, much more intelligent, different life experience. It's a lot harder, right? That's why, married young, you don't have as great expectations. You've seen the world, you've done this, you've done that, so now you have different expectations. Makes things a little more difficult, but the problem is they get messed up by the system. And then by the time they want to settle down, system messes them up. Either they don't get married or they get married late, barely have kids, if they can have kids. I know someone got married late, and they can't have kids naturally. They won't have kids naturally. Now they're in the mid-40s, almost. Tried in vitro, it didn't work, can't afford it now. They're not gonna have kids naturally. Right? Got messed up by the system. Totally messed up by the system. So there's a reality. And there's a reason the system is the way it is. And it makes perfect sense. Definitely makes perfect sense. Doesn't always work the way it should, not necessarily, but that's because we mess it up. We can meet the right person, the right spiritual soul, this, that, we can mess it up. Because it's like a plant. You take it, you don't water it, it dies. I know of a couple cases here where people got divorced after being married 30 years, 35 years. Now, it could be the marriage was bad, and the kids growing up, they didn't want to get divorced, and now, okay, different things. Thank God I'm not privy to the information. That can also happen. Right? It can also happen. Now, should that happen? No. Shouldn't happen at all. But, a lot of different potential reasons why. That's why we can, we always have to be growing spiritually. We always have to be learning. We have to be, we have to be going in the right direction. There's a phenomenon today. There are guys, gone to the best yeshivas, and they flake out. They flake out. They say, you know what? I'm tired of this. I want, I want to live in the secular world. Now, it had nothing to do with, it had nothing to do with anything. It had nothing to do with depression. It had nothing to do with anything. They're just like, I don't want to live this world, this life anymore. And what's really behind it, this phenomenon, is that they don't internalize the message. Gotta learn, but they don't internalize the message. And the fear of heaven goes out the window. So they leave it. People, leave their spouses because they become not religious, or I've heard stories, people changing sexes. I mean, whatever, crazy stories. Absolutely crazy stories. How can it be? Because they didn't get the message. Right? And that, that's our job. We have to get the message out there better. When the learning is not just about crunching, not just crunching numbers, but, crunching ideas and why they disagree and why this and why that, and, picky in detail. Yeah, you got to learn. And there's a lot of picky in detail, but you have to understand what you're doing. You have to understand why you're doing it. And if you don't, then at some point a person can just crack. It's because it's a marshmallow generation. They can crack for any number of reasons. Right? I had a whole discussion with someone earlier today. All kinds of different things, crazy things that, that are not the norm. They should not be the norm. So, so why can these things happen? These things can happen because, what we learn, we do because otherwise I don't want to find help forever. I want to get a good marriage partner. I want this, I want that, but they don't get the message. And if you don't get the message, what's going to happen? Eventually, you're just going to throw the whole thing out. It's only a matter of when. Right? It's only a matter of when. Someone says, should we take the medrash to heart? Medrash, I think, in many ways, it didn't make it into the Talmud. Right? But a lot of interesting things in the medrash. Sometimes you can look at the medrash as an exaggeration. It doesn't have any halachic authority. Right? Medrash does not have any halachic authority. But someone's telling me different things today that, whatever, different, wild things that you look at the verse and say, wow, this is what's really going on. And, even if it doesn't have, any credence when it comes to Jewish law, right? It doesn't have that kind of power, right? it doesn't mean the statements aren't necessarily true, right? There can be contradictions. There can be contradictions in midrashim. That makes it a little more difficult to, to understand, because you can have direct contradictions. The Talmud, you can have direct contradictions. Usually we have answers. We usually have a way to answer it up. Right? By midrashim, it's a little more difficult, but a lot of it is much more esoteric. So I think it's interesting to learn, but practical ramifications it doesn't have. Right? So it's not a question of believing it or not believing it. The question is, how strong is that validity? Does it have any halakhic validity? It doesn't. Right? In general, it doesn't, but it does, just like the Talmud does, fills in a lot of gaps and a lot of information that we wouldn't normally have. You look at what the Torah says in a different way. That's what I would say on that. Any other questions? Now you didn't run out. You think about it whether you're in the middle of prayer or in the bathroom. That's why you're going to give me a break. All right, I'm going to stop there. It is every Sunday, 9:00 Eastern time, 4:00 Israel time. There will be no Tanakh talk since his computer broke and I had nothing to do with that. But there will be a class for no hidations at 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. I'll speak about Ger Toshav, so that should be interesting. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, or Michael Chaim Kaufman. Or you can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com.